Welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm your own Corinne. And my guest for this episode is Jared Olson, who is the senior consultant at DSoft, which is a contractor for the U.S. Department of Defense. And we're ending this year with a bang. Well, not literally, but Jared now does consulting for the government agency known as Space Force, or I should say the military agency. We've had people on the show from NASA, and we've had people from the military of various countries, but we've never had someone from a Space Force before. So this is really exciting. Jared, welcome to the program.
Hey, Yaron. Yeah, thanks for the invite. I'm happy to be here.
So for people watching this on video, it looks like you're in space right now.
Like my background, yeah.
Yeah, I do like it. Where are you actually located right now?
So I'm in Colorado Springs, Colorado, a little south of Denver. And so I grew up in Denver, and I moved out to Houston in 2007 and lived there and worked at NASA for 13 years. And then just last summer, came back here to Colorado Springs, got back close to family, back close to home. So Colorado Springs is a lot of Department of Defense, a lot of space here, a lot of aerospace. So there's Peterson Air Force Base and Schriever Air Force Base, where most of the U.S. space infrastructure is situated.
Oh, I didn't know that. Are you ever there, or do you just work from home at the moment?
So mostly for the past year or so, I've been working balanced from home and the contractor office, which is nearby in the Springs here, north side of the Springs. But I do occasionally go into there's a building that the Space Force uses that's close to Peterson Air Force Base, where they have lots of contractors, and they do some of the work there in the protected security type building.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I've known you for a while now, and
yeah, it was back 2016 when I came to the first CMW Con in New York City.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, about 5 years ago. You were working then at NASA, as you mentioned, and Darren and James, who were your colleagues, have been on this show. What made you decide to? Let me start with before we get to that. How did you end up working at NASA? I mean, what made you decide to go into that whole sector?
Yeah, so growing up, I was always interested in science and technology and space. I got into astronomy, telescopes, and all that type of thing. So I'd been following the space industry for a long time. I went to school at Colorado State and did space engineering. That was my degree, and that was a combination of aerospace and mechanical engineering and how it applies to space. And I worked up there in Fort Collins, Colorado for a year, and then a friend of mine in Houston, a friend of mine from high school, got my name in the door at NASA. And so it wasn't something that I was, thought that I could ever pursue realistically. Like I didn't think I would be able to work out down there, but they're like, yeah, there's these contractors, and you can get your name in the door and get hired. So he gave my name to his manager, and we did an interview, and I had to think about it for a while if I really wanted to leave Colorado, leave my family, but I was really excited to work at NASA, and it was a really good opportunity. I got to do some amazing things there.
Yeah. When was that?
That was 2007 that I started in Houston. And so I worked in the flight operations directorate. Yeah, like you said, with Darren Welsh and James Montalvo. They were in the spacewalk group. I was in the robotics group. And so that you can see that's the Canadarm2 holding Dexter manipulator. So we became experts in that system, and commanded it from Mission Control in Houston.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that for people who are just listening. Well, in any case, that robotic arm has a big Canada thing on it. I guess it's made in Canada. I was trying to think where I've seen it before. Now I think I've seen it on Canadian Money. There's some Canadian bill. They're so proud of like this accomplishment they've made to the space opera program or something.
Yeah, it's a big accomplishment, big contribution. So they have it on the $5 bill.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Um, uh, yeah. So well, we're gonna get into Wiki stuff, but besides Wiki stuff, what were you doing there? What kinds of things did you do there at NASA?
So I became a flight controller and instructor. So I instructed astronauts for a while on how to manipulate the robot for when they're in space. And then I transitioned to being a flight controller. So we would make sure the system was working correctly, make sure it was set up for each operation, and then we would generate procedures to actually move the arm from Houston. So we would send all the commands from mission control and control the arm remotely, moving it to different places, fixing things on the space station, or supporting astronauts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's amazing. Did it involve hardware knowledge or just software or like
So
logistics?
it was a lot of both, yeah, a lot of hardware knowledge about how the arm was built, what things on it can break, and then the software that drove the arm. We had to understand how the software is written in case the software broke, or just in order to use it for sending those commands. Um, and then
Yeah,
a lot of planning and getting ready for the operations, that type of thing, looking ahead and writing timelines, coordinating with other disciplines to get things ready.
yeah, yeah. It's so amazing. I mean, I'm in the software field too, but it's such a different kind of world. Like if I make a mistake or put a bug in my program, then it could crash the browser for like 100 people or something. But in your case, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in damage potentially if the mistake happens.
Right. So you had to double check everything you're doing, and we had to have several other people checking each other's work right when we were actually sending the commands. And yeah, we would do simulations where they would purposely break part of the software, and then we'd have to try to save the astronaut or complete the mission in the simulation with the broken software. So it is a different world.
Wow. Yeah. Um, did you have any? Were there any mishaps while you were
So
there?
uh, like actual mishaps on the space station, nothing major, but there were times where things on the arm would break. So one example was the end effector, the end that actually can grab things, started to get degraded, and mechanisms started to stop working, and they had to actually replace pieces of the end effector. They had to go up and lubricate mechanisms in the end effector. So we worked a lot with the spacewalk group to accomplish that type of maintenance. One of the biggest failures that I worked on was there was a big electrical switch that broke on the space station that took out many channels of power on the space station. So a lot of it was unpowered. And I was on the team that planned how to take this Dexter manipulator and go out and change out that switch. And we wrote the procedure and went out and fixed it in a matter of 72 hours to get the power back up and running. That was the biggest kind of emergency that I worked.
Yeah, wow. Okay, okay. So you have to plan out the whole operation ahead of time, like that's a whole process even before anyone actually goes and does anything. Does
Exactly. Yeah, plan out how long you think it'll take, what kind of constraints are going to happen, and what other people have to do to support you.
Yeah. Were you ever talking directly to astronauts?
So there were a few times I did, because we would support release of some of the visiting vehicles. So the arm would be holding a spaceship at the end of it, and I was controlling the arm. So I would be talking to the astronauts that are watching on the space station. They're monitoring, making sure it's all working correctly. And I would send the command to release that spacecraft, and it would back away, and then we would move the arm away. So I'd be telling the astronaut, okay, we're going to release it now. Start watching. So that was pretty exciting times.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Yeah, yeah. Um, what's the lag time, by the way, between when you say something and when they hear you? Just
It's
out of
2 to 3
curiosity.
seconds.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So it's not really long, but it's something that can be noticeable and that applies to your commands and applies to the telemetry too, right? So when I sent the command to do that release, I didn't see it didn't go like it took 2 seconds to get up there to space, and then it took 2 seconds for the information that it got up to space to come back to me. So there's a lag that you have to deal with.
Yeah, okay. You can't be like, you can't count down to the people, to like when to turn a screw or whatever.
Yeah, it's not going to correspond exactly when they see it.
Wow. So Space Force was created, I guess moving on to Space Force, it was created in 2017 or something?
So just a few years ago, yeah, they started to discuss, making it a new branch. And then over just the past year or so, they've really started to implement different branches of the Space Force as their own kind of branches of the military. The Space Force itself is the newest branch. They took parts of the Air Force that were dedicated to space and made that specifically its own branch of the military.
Yeah. I mean, I think when a lot of people hear the term Space Force, they're imagining, we send up our spaceship, some other country sends up their spaceship, and then they shoot lasers at each other, and whoever has the strongest lasers wins or something.
Yeah, red and green lasers all over the place.
Yeah. I'm assuming that's not the case.
So no, not exactly. It's developed over the years, right? As the more people start sending up more and more satellites, but it's really nowadays dedicated to protecting the satellites that we use day to day. We use it for so many things now in the modern technological world. Protecting the satellites, the GPS satellites everybody uses, and then kind of tracking and monitoring both our satellites and other countries' satellites. Some of it's monitoring space junk, and that's used to keep people on the space station safe, people on other spaceships that are going up, keep them safe from space junk. The military does that with the monitoring satellites. It's all developing, tactics and that type of thing to do that protection.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the space junk stuff I assume is not secret per se. I mean, it's sort of like a problem for everyone equally.
Right, it's a problem that applies to everybody, right?
Yeah. I was reading every time some country does some like test explosion in space or something, it noticeably makes the problem worse.
It does noticeably make the problem worse. And I was just reading yesterday, Russia actually did an anti-satellite missile test, and they hit one of their own satellites with a missile and created a debris field in low Earth orbit. So it's a challenge that we're going to have to address, how to manage the kind of different international diplomatic relations to resolve that problem.
Yeah, okay. I mean, is there any way to reduce the amount of space junk? Can you like create a huge net or something? And I mean, that's a dumb question, but
discussed. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow.
There's different theories, and there's you can make like a satellite with a grappling hook that grabs something and then deorbits it. If you slow something down enough, it'll fall into the atmosphere and burn up. Or you can use a robotic arm. So a satellite with a robotic arm could get close to a piece of space junk and grab it and use that to deorbit it. But at the same time, you could use a satellite with a robotic arm to attack another satellite, right? So you could use that to get close to something and disable it or change its orbit. So it's all things that people are starting to think about.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's sort of there's a gray area between defense and offense, I guess.
Exactly, and you don't always know. It's not obvious, what somebody is pursuing.
Yeah. I mean, do you think satellites in the future are going to get better about like protecting themselves? Is that even really an option for some GPS satellite to actually maneuver or whatever to defend itself?
I think they will get somewhat better at protecting themselves, and it's a kind of a design limitation. Yeah, how much propellant you can put on it, but as we improve the types of thrusters or use thrusters that only use a small amount of propellant, you could make satellites that are able to maneuver themselves frequently to avoid problems. Yeah, that's
Right,
kind of
okay.
something you have to do.
Yeah. Wow. So how did you decide to join? Well, you didn't join Space Force per se, but how did you decide to like, well, I don't know how you describe it, to start working for Space Force?
It was a hard decision to, decide to leave NASA for sure, and I enjoyed my work there, but I missed being in Colorado, missed being close to my family, so I found the opportunity, working, since I was working with the Wiki at NASA. We can talk a little bit more about how that started, but I was in touch with people out here that also were looking into wikis, and so that's how I found the opportunity. And so to help Space Force build a wiki to use the same way that NASA uses their wiki.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, that's a great segue. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So MediaWiki actually was part of the decision for you to move to join Space Force, or however you'd call it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Well, this was covered. Well, it was a while ago anyway. It was covered in the episode with Darren and James. But what is the use of Wiki at NASA that you were involved with?
Right. So now they have a wiki that is used, across the flight operations directorate. It's grown over the years, and there's several hundred users, active users. I was there at the beginning in 2012, 2013. Since I mentioned I was a close colleague of James and Darren, just working with spacewalk stuff and robotics together. I was aware of their wiki project when they first started it, and I was part of the group that had the SharePoint wiki, and I happened to be the point of contact for our SharePoint wiki. Just trying to grow that body of knowledge as a resource for our robotics team, and then found out that just through the grapevine or poking around, I found the URL that James and Darren had their wiki installed at. And so
Yeah.
I approached Darren. I was like, "Wow, this is awesome." I'd used Wikipedia a little bit, and I was really interested in the interface and all the features that MediaWiki brings. And so I talked to him about it, and he came back the next day and said, "Hey, yeah, I ran the script and imported all your SharePoint pages to a new server, and you have this Robo Wiki now." So I was really excited. That was like Christmas for me. I had all these new pages to play with, all these new MediaWiki features, and I was never a huge fan of the SharePoint wiki. I was a fan of the idea of a wiki, right? And so it grew from there. We grew it within robotics and used it in the robotics group, separate from the spacewalk group, and then down the road we eventually merged all the wikis together to form the larger ISS space station wiki.
Yeah. Um. So I mean, how many people? I guess you're not. Are you still involved with that wiki at all? Do you still have access to it?
I don't still have access to it, but I am in touch with folks still at NASA that are working on it.
Yeah. Okay. How many people at this point are you using that wiki? Do you have any idea?
So the ISS wiki as a whole now that we've merged all the wikis together, it's on the order of 300 or so, 300 to 400 active users. That's like a monthly active count.
Yeah.
And then that's like people that are actually editing things. And beyond that, it's several hundred more that are using it and reading it regularly.
Yeah. I can't remember if we talked about this with Darren and James. I can't remember if it had happened yet, but there was like an astronaut editing Wikipedia from space, just kind of a random thing.
Yeah, that I think that was just in the last year or two, and that was before I left NASA, so that was pretty interesting. So she was willing to be the first editor from space, and it was pretty cool to kind of promote that, publicize it.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Um, so so when you joined Space Force, were they actively thinking about a wiki or data management or something, or was it were you sort of instrumental in getting that idea there?
So they were actively looking into it, and they knew they had identified the problem of data management. They knew they needed more, a better solution for it. And So there was some cross training happening between Space Force folks and NASA folks. They were coming out to NASA for some training. And so that's how they became aware of the ISS wiki. And they're like,
Oh, okay.
yeah, this is exactly, using MediaWiki is exactly what we wanted. And so that's what I've been doing. There wasn't anything already created here using MediaWiki, so I'm the first one at Space Force using MediaWiki. I'm trying to build that and find a home for it, find a group that will, be the owner of it, and get it hosted on a Space Force system.
Yeah. Um, it's always weird, with government agencies and so forth, and or equally large corporations, because I mean, the money is there presumably to pay for any data management solution, however expensive or convoluted or something. So it's always sort of a surprise when people go with an open source free option. Was that ever an issue? Were there like people lobbying for using whatever it is, Microsoft products or anything else?
So a little bit, yeah, and there was a group that was lobbying to use SharePoint for Wiki, and I don't know how much it was designed to be the same kind of wiki that we're developing now. Ours is specifically tailored to tactical doctrine, is what they call it. So that's like different ways to plan out how they're going to use tactics for a certain operation, right? Kind of what we were talking before about the enemy satellites or good satellites, how you're going to protect them. So there was some talk about using SharePoint for that, and there may still be end up being a SharePoint wiki, but we were able to convince the right people that MediaWiki had all these great features. There's a lot of great extensions. There's a great community behind it, that it made more sense to pursue that for the tactical doctrine part of it. And so it's one of those things, right? You have to kind of grow from the bottom up. You have to get your foot in the door and show people that it's useful. So that's the stage we're at now. We're at the point where we have something built, and we're trying to show the right people so that we get the right home and get funding for the hosting part of it specifically. We still need that in order to have a server that we can put all this software and extensions on.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, you make it sound like it's still sort of a skunkworks project, like kind of under the radar.
So it feels like that to me because we're not at the point where it's pushed out to production yet. But there's buy-in from a lot of different people that this is a really great idea and we want to pursue it. So we're still feeling out the best way to implement different parts of what they're interested in, right? Like lessons learned, tracking, assessments of operations, mission briefings, and then the tactical doctrine part of it.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, you had I think at EMW Con earlier this year, the Enterprise Media Wiki conference, you talked there. You were there with somebody who actually is from Space Force, like a commissioned officer or whatever it was.
Right.
So presumably it's more than just you setting up some software on some laptop or something.
That's right. That might have been how it started at NASA, but yeah, since this was Captain Nathaniel Lee that we're working with from the Space Force, where he's our point of contact that has been helping kind of push the idea on the government side, right, and get approval from the right people, and look for funding for the hosting. And so my team at DSoft has been working to build out the wiki software part of it, a subsystem that can drive all the wiki pages. Along with that, subsystem is separate from the wiki. It's called a tactical decision aid subsystem. And so that's a tool, a set of tools that the warfighters will be able to use to, assess an orbit, for example, determine what will happen if a satellite does a certain boost of their orbit, and that way they can use these tools to kind of apply to their tactical doctrine development that they'll then perform on the wiki. They'll use these tools to kind of assess different ideas, and then when they make a decision, they'll put those ideas on a wiki page and develop it there together collaboratively.
Yeah. Okay. Is there custom software that you guys have created around the wiki, or is this sort of software that's separate from the wiki, but then you put the results into the wiki, or that kind of thing?
Right, so it's separate from the wiki. It's software that some folks in the Space Force have created, and we're learning to make our own, or make like kind of a toolkit that now warfighters can use to make their own tools, and we're making that hostable in a web interface, and then basically the wiki will point back and forth to those tools. So it's hosted outside the MediaWiki software, but we'll have, for example, you could have a tactical decision aid page for a certain tool, and then on that page, on that wiki page, you have an info box that has a bunch of links that point out to the tool itself and how to use it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. You said before that one of the advantages of MediaWiki is that it's already customized for your specific needs. I can't remember the exact wording you had, but do you mean like that you're reusing some of the data structures from the NASA wiki? I mean, are you talking about templates and that kind of thing?
Yeah, some templates. So I'm trying to take, all the different pieces of my experience and bring them together in a, the best kind of MediaWiki format, right? So we're using Semantic MediaWiki extension, cargo, page forms. We're using Watch Analytics from the NASA guys.
Yeah.
That's come in really handy, and then approved revs as well. So that's something that the Space Force is interested in. You're not really locking down a page, but you're making it so the average user just can't change anything at will. They still have to have that approval in the process. So there's some pages that they want to do that where they're more critical pages. You want to have approved revs enabled on those pages.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a vague memory of having actually worked with you on some change to approved revs,
Right,
some new feature. Yeah,
there was one of those, EMW cons where it was, the Create Camp, and you sat down with me, kind of walked me through some of the coding, and we fixed a bug, and that was
oh, that's right, yeah.
Kind of development towards my software engineering background. So I've been appreciative of that. It's showing me like, okay, you don't have to be scared of the code. You have to figure it out. You have to learn the coding language, but you'll get there through time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this came up recently. That a lot of software development is just you keep working on it until it's not broken anymore, and then you move on, and you don't really have to understand anything beyond that.
Yeah, understand what you have to understand.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm always interested in data structure stuff. I mean, I'm thinking about it a lot more now because I have this extension I came out with last year called Page Exchange, that basically lets you define what I call a package of pages, like templates, forms, and all of that, so that you publish it in one place and then other people can download it to their wiki. So potentially, whether it's something that's useful for any military agency or any space-related agency, whatever it is, if there's something that can be reused, then it's good to make it officially reusable.
Right. So kind of in a central place where multiple people can use the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, do you think any of what exists now? I don't know if any of it is either confidential or what's the word? There's some like government synonym for confidential.
Yeah,
sensitive or whatever.
Sensitive, classified. Yeah.
Either that or just proprietary. Like it's not, they don't want to release it as open source. But in theory, anyway, is there stuff that is generic that could be used by others, whether in the U.S. military or elsewhere?
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that we've been pursuing as far as kind of how we're going to host the software. So there's a infrastructure called Platform One on the Air Force side. Platform One is a pretty new infrastructure that implements DevSecOps. So DevOps, is where kind of you can develop your software quickly and push it out as soon as you have something usable and it's kind of deployed right away. You add the sec in there, so you have different security scans as part of the process. And so this Platform One service is what we're planning to get hosted on. And they use Docker containers and they use Kubernetes on their system.
Yeah.
So we've been basically containerizing the MediaWiki software and the tactical decision-aid software that I mentioned into different containers and making those talk together. And the goal is that we'll go through the security scans, right, and we'll get it approved for use on a government system. And that means that anybody on a government system will be able to use the same wiki image. It'll be published out there on Platform One for people to use for different purposes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, a lot of people seem to be moving in that direction of using Docker and that kind of thing. That reminds me, though, I mean, NASA, they developed something that doesn't use Docker, uses Ansible, I believe, called Mesa.
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, we at WikiWorks and we looked into using Mesa, but we ended up just switching to Docker because Docker just seems like a better approach than Ansible for various reasons. But I don't know. Did you also consider using Mesa?
So right, I was familiar with Mesa since we used it in S, and I had learned bits and pieces of it over the years. So once I moved here to DSoft, then I started to the first thing I practiced was installing a wiki from scratch so that I could learn, each of the pieces individually. And I started installing extensions from scratch and then learning how those extensions, would have dependencies on each other, how to configure them. But just recently, I was successful in getting Mesa running inside a Docker container. So I'm looking into using that. So
okay.
Still using Mesa potentially while being able to deploy to the Platform One environment using containers. And taking best of the different worlds, bringing in some features from Mesa, some of the automation. And I've also been in touch with Lex Sulzer, looking at his ontology work that he's been doing.
Right.
And so we've imported his system core ontology to use that for Semantic MediaWiki. And that's been a great start for some of the templates and forms.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm only starting to understand this whole world, but I guess it makes sense. You can use the software in different combinations: Docker, Kubernetes, Ansible, whatever else. There's a whole bunch at this point.
Right. And you can nest things inside other things.
Oh,
right?
yeah, right.
Levels.
Yeah. There's actually there's an SMWCon, which is upcoming, although I believe it will have happened by the time this episode comes out. So, but there already was.
There already was.
Yeah, like a meeting there for all the different groups who are using Docker or developing Docker strategies. So.
Okay, excellent.
So maybe you were there for that.
Yeah, I think I was there.
Oh, you were? Okay. All right. Very good. I guess I saw you there.
But yeah, that's the idea, is right. You get this Docker container that's good for lots of different things. You publish that as an image, and then you can pull that down when you need a new container. You can throw it away, and you pull that image down and rebuild it, and it's up and running again. So if you get that running on Kubernetes and there's a problem, Kubernetes automatically starts up a new one for you, and it eliminates a lot of downtime, adds a lot of resiliency.
Yeah. Yeah, so that not just to plug my page exchange extension again briefly. I mean, that in conjunction with page exchange or something like it, and there are actually alternative things to page exchange that other people have created, but something like that, where I think it could work really well, where you easily set up the image or whatever it's called, the instance of the image. There's some term for that. Container, I don't know.
Yeah, you take the image and you build a container from it, right?
Okay, yeah. So you easily set up the container, and then you press some buttons or call some commands, and then you have all the data structures in place also. And then at that point, it really is like having a custom application for whatever it is, operations management or whatever it is you're trying to do, like.
Right.
Just right there. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could have. I definitely think that's a good idea. Have page exchange kind of built into the image.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Wow.
You could do it both ways. You could have some of it built into the image as kind of a core subset of pages and capabilities, and then on top of that, you can always pull in new sets.
Yeah.
After you build the image.
All right, awesome. Cool. So, what? Well, I mean, I don't know how best to ask it. Is there anything custom that you've created for Space Force? Like, what's the what's the most classified thing that you have on the wiki? That's sort of my question, but
so at the moment we're doing all the development totally unclassified, and so you keep the core software, you pull in the open source bits of it and the extensions, and it doesn't really become classified until you start to add the data to it.
Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm just asking about the data structures, not the actual data, but still, it might be kind of dicey, like for you to say exactly what kinds of information you're storing on the wiki. I don't know.
The majority of it, is tactical doctrine information, like I was mentioning, and then lessons learned type information. But so far we've built like a base structure of like landing pages. So there's a home page with links to different places, including a user guide link. So we have a portal that's built out, so you click that user guide link and it shows you all the different things a brand new user might need to know about MediaWiki, how to get started.
Yeah. At what point do you think it'll actually get the acceptance, the okay that it needs to become like an official IT part of the IT setup, or is it already for some people?
So it's that the funding piece is what could come any minute. It could be really short term, but we've been waiting for a few months for everything to come together. But once we get that piece of it, then it'll just be a matter of getting through the security scans that I mentioned to get approved to get hosted out on Platform One. And so I'm expecting that'll be weeks to months to get through the security hoops. It's the type of thing where there'll be a scan and they'll tell you what some of your vulnerabilities are, and you have to go out and address those, and then bring it back and do another scan.
Yeah, so someone is going to audit all of the MediaWiki software?
Right. Audit
okay.
the MediaWiki software and the other software we're developing next to it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So since it's open source and widely used, Wikipedia is using a lot of the extensions we're using, so I don't expect that to be too tricky, but we'll have to meet certain security constraints and authentication protocols and that type of thing.
Right. Are there other government regulations about software, like accessibility, I don't know what else, internationalization, that kind of thing, that, I mean, presumably MediaWiki will pass through all those hoops too, but I don't know if that kind of thing is an issue also.
Yeah, it is. It is something that we'll address, and I do expect MediaWiki, since it's able to support all that, will be able to get through the hurdles pretty easily. There's 508 compliance and that type of thing, and that's something that
Yeah.
Soft in general is pushing to build into all the software we develop.
Yeah, I remember being at some job where they were trying to get the software to pass through 508 compliance and to really get to, the go through, what is it, cross every T and dot every I and all that. It's a ton of work, just all these little things like I can't even remember now. Like links have to be underlined and they have to be in a certain shade of blue or something. I mean, that was just
Lots of details.
one of many things. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't get the sense that it's quite that restrictive to get onto this hosting platform, but I'm expecting there'll be a little bit of that. So it's a matter of how long it will take to get through the security stuff mostly, but we are pursuing. So that's for specific, like I mentioned, the tactical doctrine, which is under a group called the Space Training and Readiness Command. That's part of Space Force. So they're kind of dealing with the tactics specific part, but there's another group called the Space Security and Defense Program, and the Space Warfighter Analysis Center. Those two groups are working towards more like development and testing environments. So there is an option for us to potentially get a wiki on that environment before our platform one goes through. And on top of that, I'm pursuing a wiki for DSOF specifically, right? Not for space
Okay.
support, but just for DSOF technology as a company. It's really useful for keeping track of personnel, keeping track of little onboarding and lessons learned, user guide stuff. So that's something we'll probably use the software for as well. Just like I was saying, taking that image and make another instance of it.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, that's a really good sign. Eating your own dog food, as they say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Make it taste better as you deploy it, right?
Sure. Yes. um. Uh. Um. So how many wikis are you talking about in all there? What was it, 5 or something potentially?
Well, it depends on how many levels. Like we're talking about the multi-level security environment. So you'll have to have separate wikis for each of those different levels.
Oh, okay.
So I think it'll be on the order of 5, yeah. Once assuming we implement the DSoft one as well. And we are looking at some of the extensions or development towards transferring from one wiki to another. And that's something that like Marsh Hirschberger is developing the MediaWiki Git type concept, where you can use Git as an intermediary. And there's been that page sync extension I've read about. So find good ways like to copy things from one server that should also be on another server, and then you can add onto the second one on top of that. But you want to kind of keep the base information in sync across wikis.
Yeah, I remember him giving a talk about that a while ago on the Git for MediaWiki thing. I don't know if there's progress on that. Hopefully there is.
Yeah, I think there's been a little progress, and it's something that I'm interested in potentially contributing to if we get that running.
Yeah, okay. I mean, do you have a budget or a staff at this point?
So I have 2 engineers on my team, software engineers. So it's 3 of us working this project, but potentially we could get a budget for a specific type of extension development.
Yeah. Okay, that's really good to hear, actually. Yeah.
Especially if we get this running out on the Space Force Wiki and they see the need for this type of synchronization and they ask for it specifically, that's even more of a driver for a budget.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, from the perspective of someone who wants to ensure the software is viable for as long as possible, indefinitely, really.
Right.
It's always good to hear that there's additional sources of funding and development and potentially growing at this point. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, it's pretty neat. Now there's three. There's besides you, there's also of course the NASA guys, and then the people at NASA in Ohio
Right.
also, who will fingers crossed be hosting the in-person EMW con next year.
Next year. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
But yeah, it's I don't know why that is that for some reason NASA and space, I guess, has embraced MediaWiki to the extent that they have. Yeah, I mean, well, with Space Force, there is the connection. It's not totally coincidental, but still, I mean. I don't know. Do you, and I guess I could add the military in general, even though NASA and the military are different things. It's still, the military have used it both in the U.S. and in other countries. Other countries' militaries have made use of MediaWiki. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is it easy? Is there less software available that fits that role, or are people more willing to try something that's not on the software that's not on the standard approved lists or whatever?
So I think it is a lot of like just kind of growing from one place, from what James and Darren started with Meza early on. So, and that's been picked up different places, but the core need is something that's kind of common to space, common to military, where we identify the need to solve these problems, and the best way to solve problems is to communicate. And once people realize, okay, if you get everybody communicating in a central place in a collaborative way, it adds a lot of power to the problem solving. And that's what I think everybody's starting to understand, and that's why it's being picked up.
Oh, yeah, cool. That's a great advertisement for MediaWiki. I mean, it's really what it's about is knowledge sharing, coordination, all that.
Yeah, definitely. I think all these extensions contribute directly to that. Like Watch Analytics, we were saying to push the reviews, so you see what somebody else changed on your page, that drives communication. And using Cirrus Search and Elasticsearch to pull in other types of information into the wiki is another benefit to kind of push that communication. So yeah, I got a Elasticsearch container running, and so configure that so Cirrus Search is calling the Elasticsearch container. So you can use the same kind of Docker strategy.
Cool. So you're using Elasticsearch to do a search not just on the wiki contents, but on other systems also?
That's the goal. I haven't tied in another system yet, but there are other Space Force systems that we can potentially leverage. And one of the other groups at DSoft is working on a project called Library Manager that's kind of pulling in information from lots of different places like that. And my goal is to tie in Elasticsearch into Library Manager so that it's a one-stop shop for the warfighter to use.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, you're basically creating a search engine for the whole team or the whole department or all Space Force or whatever it is.
Right. So I have some learning to do on search in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know anything about how to set up Elasticsearch, but it's really powerful if you use all the functionality from what I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Are you implementing other? Are you working on other software besides MediaWiki or other installations of WordPress or whatever? Do you have other stuff set up?
What we're using for some of those tactical decision aids, we're using Angular and tied in with Cesium. Cesium is a kind of visualization tool that's used in the space domain. So you can draw like a visualization of the Earth, and then you can draw orbits around the Earth.
Oh wow.
And then you use Angular to to draw UI on that web page, and then the user can enter different parameters for the satellite and say apply, and it'll change the orbit a certain way. So it's a good way to kind of get new people onboarded and teach them some of these orbital dynamic concepts, which are not always intuitive.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I hadn't heard of cesium. I'm looking it up now. It looks amazing. Is it open source?
I'm not sure. I think there is a free version that you can play around with, but you can build a lot of different UI elements onto it, and you can change like the time span. There's a slider bar at the bottom, so you can slide forward or back in time.
Wow. Okay.
So you can see where a satellite's going to be in the future, and it's the kind of thing where you can have all this back-end calculation software on a server. So that's something that we're building a container for. So it has like astrodynamics algorithms in that container that can do calculations. So you send some parameters to that container, and it sends you back the information to draw the orbit on cesium.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of capability and potential there for ways we could build that. And as much as possible, I want to tie that into the wiki, use the wiki for help guides and user guides. And, if we have a lessons learned database that talks about specific events, say there was a training event, you record that event as a wiki page with all the various information linked to it, and then you link to the tool, the cesium tool, that can kind of describe and show what happened.
Yeah. Is there potential for actual integration, whether it's putting a cesium visualization or something in the wiki page, or conversely having something like OpenStreetMap for cesium, where you can put in little markers on things and make those clickable?
That's something I'd love to look into, yeah, to see if you can make a direct link. I know you can link little like tooltips in cesium, so I'd love to have that link directly back to the wiki page. And yeah, if there'd be a way on the wiki page to have a little embeddable cesium tool that you can see all the time on that page, that'd be really useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right now we have it set up so you basically jump out of the wiki to go to the tool, and then you have to jump back into the wiki.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that makes Google Maps seem kind of silly. I mean, it only shows you things on planet Earth. It's
yeah. Now we're talking all over the Earth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cislunar space. It's between the Earth and the Moon. Yeah, they're talking a lot about that nowadays.
Yeah. Okay. Right. That's where the action is. Wow. I mean, can you actually have a map of like every? Can you actually show every satellite that's in space right now? Does anyone have that information, like everything?
Well, so by now there's thousands and thousands and thousands of satellites, so that some of that information is out there, and then out there and publicly available for public satellites, and so you can download that and render it. So that would be a data set. You could have a ton of satellites orbiting your Earth. They'd be going all over the place. And then there's a bunch of that data is at the classified level. So only certain parts of the Space Force have access to it.
Wow, okay. And presumably there's some satellites that only other countries know about.
Right. And so part of the trick is figuring out where to look and when to look and how to figure out what somebody's doing.
Yeah, okay. And without getting too much into details, I mean, is there any chance that could end up in a wiki? Also, that kind of information about other countries' secrets, I guess you could say.
So I expect it will be potentially more information about like the tactics, like we were saying.
Okay.
If you carry that forward, you'd have tactics for they call them blue and red, right? You have tactics for the blue guys, and you can have tactics pages for the red guys, and that's stuff that you have gathered over time, from observation, that type of thing.
Okay, blue is us or you, and
Blue
red is
us
everyone
and
else.
allies. You got it.
Okay, I got it. Yeah.
And what the blue guys have? Blue guys have red lasers, and the red guys have green lasers.
Is that true?
We always draw analogs with Star Wars.
Oh, okay. I never noticed that. I thought.
X-Wing.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, in space, the color tells you whether it's the good guys or the bad guys.
Right.
I didn't even notice that. Okay. Yeah.
Next time you watch Empire Strikes Back, notice the TIE fighters always shoot green.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's confusing then. All right. Okay. Yeah. So. All right. Good to know.
But yeah, we're building other things like community calendar and personnel directories into it. So like anybody in the community can make a calendar event that is something applicable to everybody on the homepage, for example. And if you don't know who somebody is, you just search their name and it'll show you their user page, right? What group they're in, what organization they're under.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess it might be disappointing to some people to hear that the wiki itself probably won't hold, the highest level secrets and stuff. That it's more about it's more of a just general operations tool and documentation and all that, which is cool. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it depends on how much we can develop, like that tie-in with CSIM and the other tools. But some of it crosses over into more like operational tools, like something you would have at mission control, right, to command a spacecraft. And that's going to have different requirements and like reliability requirements that keeps it outside the wiki.
Yeah. I'm curious about this with tools like cesium and other things like that. Do NASA, Space Force, or anyone else contribute back, whether it's software patches or funding, that kind of thing? Is there and is the Titan? Is there a chance that the same thing could happen with MediaWiki? Although, well, I mean that's already happened because NASA has already contributed extensions and so forth. But
right. I would hope that we can get to that point too, where we're contributing back to the open source community, and that's my intention. Is if we make any specific software, new software, new extensions, that we can publish it the same way the NASA folks have.
Cool. That's amazing.
I want to keep working on Meza too, along with both the guys at Glenn and the guys at Johnson. I'll keep poking at Meza and see if we can help keep that development going, keep that a strong and vibrant development.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I mean that's pretty much all my questions. I had one other question. What's the deal? Are we gonna try to nuke an asteroid at some point to see if we can see how well that works? See if we can, deflect it.
Yeah, we have to figure out some way to deflect those sooner or later. I haven't heard anything specific about like testing, but there's pros and cons to the nuke option, right? Maybe you make more fragments.
That's true.
Maybe you just disintegrate it, but
just you maybe send in a team of oil drillers.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe that's what we need.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope someone's on that. Cool. This was awesome. I think a lot of people like me are really curious about the U.S. Space Force and what's going on. So it's really cool to hear about it and to hear that anyone who's contributed to MediaWiki is also is also contributing here, and the software is being used, and it's helping out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really awesome to see all the different extensions people are contributing, and the community is great. There's always somebody to reach out to that can help if I get stuck. It's really, yeah, it's good to see that contributing back to the warfighter and seeing that kind of cross collaboration starting.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this seems like a good place to end it. Unless you want to add anything. Well, you already. It seems like
Yeah,
you already.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk through all these, and yeah, we'll see you again at a conference pretty soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, I hope so. Cool. Well, thank you, Jared, for coming on. It was great talking to you.
Thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure.